I hadn't been touched in years until that night. The home was exceedingly silent, not merely silent in the sense that it is after midnight and the refrigerator hums louder than your thoughts. No, this was the type of stillness that engulfed your throat and held. I was lying on the couch in my robe, knees pulled up, eyes puffy from sobbing over a quarrel that didn't even seem like one. Just another instance of Michael staring at his phone while I vanished behind my words. He had no idea why I had begun weeping. He never asked. I did not hear the steps, not until the hallway light burst through the hardwood and halted at my feet. I froze. I should have wiped my face, sat up straighter, and pretended to read or fall asleep. But I did not. I could not. It was Daniel, my husband's son, my stepson. He was not meant to be there. He'd flown in late for a brief weekend visit, which Michael had forgotten to mention. I hadn't seen him in over a year, and he'd grown into the type of guy who made space feel smaller, taller than I recalled, wider, and with that cautious calm in his gaze that always made me feel watched, even when he said nothing. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, and I despised how much his question jarred something in me. I attempted to lie. I murmured, "Just tired," but my voice cracked in the midst. My chest clenched. He said nothing at first. He merely drew closer, slowly, as if he was frightened I'd evaporate if he moved too fast. Then he sat next to me, uncomfortably near. The heat from him made my skin hurt. I kept my gaze fixed on the window, but I felt him watching me. I felt his hand before I saw it, his fingers wiping away a tear that I hadn't realized had dropped, the back of his knuckle warm on my cheekbone. He mumbled, "You shouldn't be alone like this." I didn't say anything. My breath caught. He kindly wiped away my tears. It simply sat there, gripping my jaw like it was fragile. And then he kissed me, not hastily, not recklessly. He kissed me as if he knew everything I hadn't told anyone. Everything was written on my lips, including the anguish in my throat, the quiet in my bed, and the way I flinched when someone grabbed for me. He was reading it. "You have no idea what I became that night. Let me show you." I did not sleep that night. Not out of remorse, which would come later, but because of how long I stayed in the dark, gazing at the location where he had kissed me. My fingertips remained pressed against my lips, as if I could still feel the weight of his mouth. My robe had dropped from one shoulder. I did not fix it. I kept hearing his words. "You should not be alone like this." The agony of that statement was not in what he said, but in how much I wanted to hear it. I had no idea how long I had been invisible until someone noticed me. It's not simply a glance saw. Michael used to gaze at me in that way in the early years. Before extended business travels, people ate meals in separate rooms, and calm routines replaced talks. I used to try harder. I wore lipstick to bed, just in case. I lit candles for supper, even if it was simply takeaway. I'd sit on the edge of our mattress, lotion on my legs, and hope he'd reach for me. He stopped reaching out some years ago. So, sure, Daniel did touch my face with both hands and tell me I deserved better. I believed him. Not because I was naive, but I was famished. Nobody criticizes a lady for eating when she hasn't been fed in years. I attempted to avoid him the next day. I lingered in the kitchen for longer, took too many baths, and feigned sleep. But he was everywhere. His perfume lingered in the corridor. His shirt was flung upon the back of the dining chair. He had left his shoes by the front entrance as if he lived there, as if he belonged. And perhaps that was the problem. He belonged, but not for me. That evening, after Michael had fallen asleep in the upstairs bedroom, I went to the patio with a glass of wine and sat barefoot in the cold. I'm not sure why I assumed the darkness would keep him away. Daniel strolled outside 20 minutes later, wearing a half-zipped sweatshirt and clutching 2 fingers of bourbon in his glass. We did not talk. He sat next to me as if he had the right to. The kiss seemed to represent something to each of us, and perhaps it did. I should not have done it, he admitted after a long time. I glanced directly ahead. I understand, but I did not intend it. He did not apologize. He didn't take it back. Instead, he leaned in again, but did not kiss. Not this time, but to place his forehead to mine. His breath reached my collarbone before his hands did. His fingers brushed over my knee, crept higher, and I did not stop him. I told myself it would end with his touch, that I would let him skim my skin and perhaps even lean into the warmth of his hand, but nothing more. But that was a lie I had uttered far too often throughout my life. I mentioned it to Michael the first time he forgot our anniversary. I'd said that when I first started sleeping facing the wall, when I couldn't recognize the lady who used to laugh without biting her tongue, I informed my reflection. So when Daniel's hand moved, he gripped my hand strongly. I didn't flinch. I did not freeze. I moaned softly and shamefully. The air between us became tighter. His fingertips caressed the inside of my leg, as if he were memorizing fault lines. The kind you whisper about before an earthquake. Tell me to stop. He spoke, his voice cracking somewhere within his chest. But I did not. The glass of wine dropped from my fingers and landed on the patio floor with a dull clink, the liquid soaking into the spaces between the stones. His lips touched my collarbone, then lowered and lingered at the point where my robe opened like a secret. I gasped, not out of astonishment, but out of extreme relief. We proceeded cautiously, as if we were frightened of disturbing the night. My hands touched his shoulders. He was shaking. I don't think it was anxiety, constraint, or the realization that one more inch would mean we couldn't go back. And then I let go. I opened up to him too quickly, too eagerly, and despised how right it felt. When we got inside, I did not go to the bedroom. I walked him down the hall to the washing room. I'm not sure why. Perhaps because it was not sacrosanct. There were no recollections of Michael there, only detergent, dust, and a naked light bulb. He softly pressed me against the chilly wall, one hand bringing my leg over his waist, and the other locating the curve in my lower back. He muttered, "I have wanted you since I was too young to say it." His voice broke and trembled. I should have told him to stop. I should have slapped him. I should have said something that conveyed maternal decency. Instead, I kissed him harder, bit his lip, and tugged his sweater over his head, allowing it to tumble behind the dryer. We did not talk again, just moved. The squeak of the shelf beside us was louder than our breathing. The buzz from the washing seemed almost taunting, and then, as he gathered me in his arms and brushed his lips on the back of my shoulder, I sobbed again. Not for shame, not even guilt, but it had been a long time since someone treated me as if I were breakable and worth shattering. I assured myself it was only once, that whatever happened between us was a mistake wrapped in anguish, a flash in the darkness. But as the light came up, I noticed his sweater on my kitchen chair and realized I was lying again. I did not sleep. I lay under the blankets, robe still open. My skin was cooling where he had kissed hours before. I kept hearing how he said it. I have wanted you since I was too little to express it. There was nothing innocent about that voice. Nothing is unclear. Only years of observation, waiting, and understanding. By the time I heard him in the hall, I had already made the bed. I'd already tightened the gold clasp on my robe, as if I could lock myself back in. "Hey," he remarked, when he discovered me in the kitchen. His eyes were kinder in daylight, but the way they stared at me remained the same. Still hungry, still being patient. I did not react. I brought him a mug of coffee and sat at the table like a mother-in-law, not someone who had begged her stepson's body to stay inside hers only hours before. "Are you okay?" he inquired while drinking. I nodded, but I didn't meet his gaze. 30 minutes later, Michael walked down the stairs, drowsy and indifferent, asking if anybody wanted pancakes. I answered yes to the syrup before Daniel did. My voice sounded pleasant and complete. My foot, however, brushed across Daniel's leg underneath the table. He did not move away. Later that day, as Michael departed to run errands, it happened again. I just got out of the shower, a towel wrapped around me, steam still clinging to the bathroom mirror. I didn't expect Daniel to knock, much less answer the door, but when he did, he didn't apologize. He was staring. "I merely wanted to check," he said, but his words faded. I froze. Water spilled from my leg to the floor, and my chest lifted too quickly. He moved one step forward, then another. "Don't I?" she whispered, but I did not intend it. He removed the towel from my hand, carefully. Let it fall. His breath reached my sternum before his lips did. I shook beneath his weight and gasped as my body opened up to him. His hands glided over me, as if he had imagined this situation, rewritten it in his thoughts 1,000 times, and yet couldn't believe it was real. "Say you desire me," he muttered, softly thrusting into me, as if he sensed I was going to collapse. "I cannot." I groaned and dug my fingers into his shoulders, but I did. I wanted him as I hadn't wanted anything in years. Not just for the fire, but for how he looked at me afterwards. Like I was still tender, youthful, and a lady. We fell to the floor together, breath tangled, his thumb stroking my jaw as I blinked back tears. I muttered, "You should not look at me like that." He leaned in, kissed me again, and whispered, "Now stop being the only thing I see." I began seeing ghosts in the mirror, not of the dead, but of the woman I once was. She appeared exhausted and pale, with her wedding band loose on her finger as if it belonged to someone else. I'd look at myself combing my hair and see Daniel's fingerprints on my thighs, ribs, and the inside of my neck. I kept telling myself that it would cease, that the intensity would burn off, that once we had it out of our system, remorse would take care of the rest. However, remorse is ineffective in extinguishing a fire that feels like love. That night, I was in the laundry room again, folding towels with trembling hands and my pulse pounding every time I heard a creak in the corridor. Daniel had sent an SMS. "I can't sleep till I know you're fine." I didn't respond. I stood there in quiet, clutching the still warm linen to my face and savoring the aroma of a house that was no longer mine. Then I overheard it. The front door unlocks. Michael. I panicked, threw the towels in the basket, and checked my image in the hall mirror. There was still a crimson bloom on my collarbone from Daniel's too hard kiss. Michael called my name once. I calmed my voice and said that I was folding clothes. He grumbled, opened the fridge, and heard the sound of a beer bottle twisting open. I pretended everything was okay. Then Daniel arrived behind me in the corridor. He's barefoot and still moist from his shower. His hair was disheveled, no shirt. I froze. He reached out to touch the small of my back. Not here, not now. But I couldn't say it out loud, especially with Michael 10 feet away. I mouthed, "Go back." Daniel moved forward nevertheless, and his lips grazed the shell of my ear. He said, "You tremble when you lie." My knees almost gave out. I moved back just in time to hear Michael's shout from the kitchen. "Have you grabbed the washing sheets, babe?" "Coming," I said, my voice a full octave and too high. When I returned with the basket, Michael was standing next to the sink, smiling weakly. He kissed my forehead and commented, "You look flushed." "I am merely warm," I lied, but my flesh was burning for another reason. That night, I lay in bed with my spouse, rigid as oak. I could feel his breath on my back, but it felt distant and staged. When he looked away, I crept out of bed and walked down the hall, like a ghost. Daniel's door opened before I knocked. We did not talk. He drew me in, slid his knee between mine, and kissed me like he didn't care if the entire house heard. And in the silence, after a time, I lay on his chest with my wedding ring, catching the moonlight on his bedsheet, and eventually uttered it. "I believe I adore you." He didn't respond. He simply hugged me closer. I stopped using perfume. I couldn't risk leaving any traces on his skin. Every detail became a calculation, including a look in the corridor and the way my clothing clung to moist skin. Whether Michael noticed how long I lingered in the shower, or whether Daniel's fingertips left imprints that cotton and denial couldn't conceal. Nevertheless, I did not stop. I persuaded myself it was a transient illness, a fever of the body and mind. But how can you reverse something that has made you feel alive for the first time in years? We never used words like love again, not because they weren't genuine, but because expressing them aloud would have made them too deadly and irreversible. Instead, we let quiet speak for us. A hand on the small of my back as I filled the dishwasher, his thumb touching mine as I offered him a drink, and me putting my head on his chest while the laundry spun. He was about to go, returning to his city, work, and normal life. He didn't say it, but I noticed it in the way he stayed at the window, watching the sky darken earlier each day. The night before he went, I discovered him in the guest room, perched on the side of the bed with both palms pushed to his face. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. He looked up, his eyes ringed with crimson. "I'm not sure how to leave you." I sat alongside him, my robe slipped open somewhat. He refused to look away. "You have to," I murmured. He nodded, but did not move. That night, we did not touch. We lay alongside each other, completely clothed and breathing in sync, as if we kept motionless long enough, time would freeze and we might have this without consequence. In the morning, I did not accompany him to the door. I listened from above as Michael gave him coffee and made jokes about traffic. I heard the door close. I counted to 20. Then I walked into the guest room. His hoodie was still there, and so was a message, folded and barely scribbled, with 4 words in his sloppy handwriting. "You were worth it." I put it on my lips. That night, I let Michael draw me into his arms. I kissed him as if nothing happened. I grinned during supper. I laughed at his humor. But my body recalled something else, a younger man's breath on my neck, hands trembling for me, and a kiss that made me cry because I felt important again. And I kept the message stashed in the back of my jewelry box, near to my wedding band, which I occasionally remove while sleeping. If this tale struck you in a way you're frightened to admit aloud, tell me anonymously or simply stay here and feel it alongside me. Subscribe to Love Deceit for every tale we've never dared to tell.